Hello, YouTube divers. This is WaterDive 122, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of the podcast for high school sports all across Western North Carolina. Yes, this YouTube series where I talk about high school sports that are happening around the Western North Carolina mountains, specifically talking about as far west as Murphy High School, as far south as Rosman High School-ish, as far north as Avery County High School, and as far east as Thomas Jefferson Classical Academy. So, with that said, today we are going to be counting down my top 5 biggest surprise teams of the 2021 spring football season. So before we get into the list, let's lay down a couple of ground rules here. First off, the main thing I'm going to be focusing on is their improvement compared to the 2019 season. In order for teams that have to qualify for this list, they would either have to be really bad or just average at best in 2019, with a few sparks to see where they're going to go in future years. And then the 2021 spring football result. And let me tell you, there are some big changes here compared to the 2019 standings. And the other thing is that, will these teams be a little bit more consistent? Now, this is not exactly a requirement for this list, but it's just something I want to just get out of the way. Like, will these teams be able to build on from the momentum that they carried out throughout this season? And will they be able to use it down the stretch? Like, are they really for real, or were they just kind of fluking it? And I say this because one of the teams from the 2018 to 2019 surprise group, West Henderson, they were bad in 2018. No offense to you West Henderson fans who are watching. And then they start off really hot. And I basically said this in my first episode where I talked about the top 5 disappointing teams. I think West Henderson was on that list. I don't really remember exactly. But in that video, I talked about West Henderson a little bit about it there. They started off undefeated, and then they lost 3 of their final 4 games, including an absolute smackdown at home in the playoffs against Kings Mountain. So, there's that. And sorry to you Falcons fans, but you will not see West Henderson on this list. And it's kind of obvious. So, that's where I kind of decided to put the little consistency formula to see if these teams are for real or not. My overall opinion about them. And the final ground rule, these teams had to have finished with a winning record this past season. Whether it be from a losing record or just 500, they would have to have a winning record this season. So, with that all out of the way, let's get frickin' into the frickin' video. Coming in at number 5 is the T.C. Robertson Rams. Now, I basically say this because T.C. Robertson was fine in 2019. I mean, they were 5-7, but they were an extremely young team. Quarterback Brody Whitson was turning the ball over a lot. And believe me, I'm watching the highlights. Like, every time I see a T.C. Robertson highlight on the WLOS Friday Football Frenzy highlight reel, like, pretty much every single time I see a Robertson highlight, it's Brody Whitson throwing an interception. I mean, that's not all the Robertson highlights, obviously. They do have some really great highlights from 2019, but a lot of the times I see Brody Whitson just throwing interceptions, and, you know, it's not fun throwing interceptions. Now, when it came to this past year, Brody Whitson turned the ball over a lot less. He and Rodney McDay absolutely killed it at the quarterback-wide receiver duo, and that helped Robertson to a 7-1 regular season, with their only loss being against A.C. Reynolds. I mean, come on, it's A.C. Reynolds. And they made it all the way to the second round of the state 3AA playoffs before absolutely getting smacked by perennial 3AA powered Dudley at T.C. Robertson by a score of 77-33. I mean, it was bad. It was Robertson fans, you know what I'm talking about. And no offense, by the way. So with that said, I think Robertson greatly improved from 2019 to the spring 2021 season. They went from 5-7 in 2019 to 7-2 in spring of 2021, including the playoffs for both years, because Robertson made the playoffs in both of those seasons. But they fell in the first round to A.L. Brown, and then this past season they made it to the second round. They fell to Dudley, so there is that. So yeah, with that said, Robertson, T.C. Robertson, they take the number 5 spot. Moving on to the number 4 spot. You got the Asheville Cougars. 2019 was a down year for the Cougars because Asheville is really one of those teams that you'd expect to be good every single season. But in 2019, they were anything but good. I would say that they were like below average at best. They were 4-7 in 2019. They didn't make the playoffs that year, but in 2021, the spring season, the first season with head coach Court Radford, who came from Chase, helped the Trojans to a winning record there in 2019. And then he came over to Asheville and he did the same thing. Helped the Cougars from a 4-7 2019 campaign to a 5-3 2021 spring campaign, including a playoff berth, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, Asheville was a nice little surprise. So was a nice comeback team this year. Even though they really should not have been classified as a comeback team because, you know, they're usually pretty freaking good. But when it compares to 2020, when it comes to 2019 to spring 2021, you kind of see a shift there in momentum swing. So that's why they land here. Number 3, you got the Franklin Panthers. And yes, you Panthers fans, you could have seen this come a long way, I guess. What do I know? So, yeah, Franklin did not make the playoffs in 2021 spring, but needless to say, they were absolutely incredible, compared to 2019. In 2019, they were young, they were very inexperienced, and as a result, you got a 1-10 season. Even though I really don't think Franklin should have been 1-10, because like Asheville, Franklin is one of those teams that is consistently good, but in 2019 and 2018 for that matter were both down years for the Franklin Panthers, and 2021 kind of saw them at a return to form. Head coach Josh Brooks definitely managed to turn that football team around, as of most of the players that were on that 1-10 team were on this team. Quarterback Chris McGuire, running back Evan Klatt, just to name a few. And as a result, Franklin was decent. I mean, they finished 4-3 on the year. Now, yes, they didn't make the playoffs, mainly because they lost on the tiebreaker to Brevard. I mean, well, Brevard didn't make the playoffs either. So, and they also lost to Pisgah as well. But honestly, the highlight of the season for Franklin, and I think a lot of you Franklin fans out there might agree, is their outstanding comeback against Hendersonville. I was watching that game via the Franklin Panthers Sports Network, and oh my god, that game was absolutely crazy. When Hendersonville looked like they had the game open, Franklin came roaring back and ended up winning 31-27. It was absolutely amazing. Mainly because Franklin scored 2 deep touchdowns. The first one came, and then they recovered the onside kick, and then, you know, the rest is history. And so, yeah, Franklin was obviously a big surprise team, and I honestly expect them to be rather consistent going forward. But, well, like I always say, we'll see. Moving on to number 2, you got the North Henderson Knights. Oh, Chris Womack, you beautiful son of a gun, you absolutely called it. In a report that he was doing on WLOS, I remember in the 2019 season when North Henderson was hosting West Henderson, West Henderson won 37-14 in that game. But he said the North would be a team that was on the rise, and oh my God, did he absolutely call it. Now, honestly, I was not expecting North Henderson to be this good. Well, to have the season that they did have. Now, yeah, they didn't make the playoffs mainly because they lost in a tiebreaker game to Asheville, where Asheville absolutely ran all over them. But overall, North Henderson did have a nice season, and this was honestly the best North Henderson team I've witnessed. And that's saying something, because ever since I started following high school football, North Henderson has just been at the bottom of the barrel in pretty much any way, shape, and form. I mean, they were winless in 2018, they were 1-10 in 2019, and here they are in 2021 spring at 4-3, winning their first 3 games, and then enduring a late season collapse. So, and this is where I'm a little bit skeptical about North Henderson going forward. Will they be able to retain that consistency? Because we all saw what happened to West Henderson. But if North Henderson has a decent to a good season, then they might end up being on next year's list. So, who knows? And then finally, number 1, you got the Hendersonville Bearcats. Yep, Hendersonville, you're the winners of this year. So, so the main reason why I put Hendersonville on here was because of their huge momentum after that devastating loss against Franklin. After their loss against Franklin, I was like, okay, Hendersonville's going to be like this below average team again. And then their offense absolutely caught fire through the remaining weeks. They went to Pisgah and handed the Bears their only regular season loss of the year. They came to Brevard and absolutely demolished the Blue Devils, and this is coming from a Brevard fan. They absolutely had our number that night. So, and I was at the game. I watched every single snap. Yeah, Brevard just looked like, I mean, I don't know. They ended up beating Smoky Mountain, which was meh. I mean, they beat the 3 teams that won the conference in 2019. Brevard, Pisgah, and Smoky Mountain. They beat all 3 of those teams in the same year. And of course, they demolished East Henderson to win the Mountain 6. And then the playoff run. The playoff run. Talk about a freaking playoff run, am I right? Snagging the number 1 seed in the 2A bracket after being the 14th seed the season before, which they ended up finishing at 5-7, which is still a good season. Just not really the way they wanted it, I guess. And when it came to the playoff run, first off, they absolutely smoked 8th seeded Bunker Hill in the first round, because there were 8 teams per division, by a score of 42-14. And then they hosted perennial 2A power Shelby, who was the 4th seed coming into that game, and they beat them. They beat them 33-31, and I was like, okay, this is the Hendersonville team that you need to absolutely watch out for. I mean, absolutely watch out for. I mean, what did I say? Did I just say the first round of the state playoffs? I'm sorry, the state quarterfinals. And then they beat Shelby in the in the wild card game. And then they beat Shelby in the state quarterfinals. There we go. And then going to the state semifinals game against Mountain Heritage, I actually thought they had a chance, and they almost beat them. But no, they lost in overtime, 30-29. Mountain Heritage would go on to go play in the state championship game, where they fell heavily to Reedsville. And believe me, as a Brevard fan, losing to Reedsville kind of hurts. So, yes, Hendersonville tops this list of the top 5 biggest surprise teams from 2021. No, from 2019 to 2021 spring. And did I mention that Hendersonville went from 5-7 to 7-3? talk about the improvement. But the amazing playoff run the Bearcats had and the momentum that they had near the end of the season is mainly why I put them here number 1. I mean, there's no question about it. And I really believe in Jim Sosabee's crew that they will be consistently good for many, many years to come. But again, we'll see. So, with that said, that concludes episode 5 of the podcast for high school sports all across Western North Carolina. Thank you so much for watching, my fellow YouTube divers. This is Water Dive 122 signing out, ready to dive into more fun on YouTube. Thanks for watching.